The Cobain case will soon be reopened as new witnesses and evidence emerge.
Nearly 30 years after Kurt Cobain's tragic death, new developments could lead to a reopening of the case. A prominent Seattle attorney and the user at iCupcake have publicly stated that they're working together to bring new evidence to light.
They claim to have witnesses who were at the house when Cobain was shot, along with overwhelming evidence that challenges the original suicide ruling.
The shocking announcement has reignited long-standing debates surrounding Cobain's death, with many fans and skeptics demanding a fresh investigation into the circumstances that led to the Nirvana frontman's passing.
About 5 years ago, at the beginning of COVID, Eric Blanc, living in France, decided to take charge of the Cobain case, and after a few discussions with Detective Tom Grant, the Frenchman conducted an incredible investigation. Alone on the other side of the world, from his living room, we saw the messages, the evidence, and the emails, and heard the audio recordings. He decided to move away from Tom Grant and work with Julia, a woman close to Janet Pfaff. Her husband worked for David Geffen and knew Courtney, Love's cook. Julia's husband also became friends with Edward Norton.
The young Frenchman's network inflated these notes and quickly accused Tom Grant of complicity and of being the author of the photos during the death of Kurt Cobain in Seattle in April 1994. Tom wanted to work with Eric on his film, The Assassination of Kurt Cobain. Very quickly, Eric Blanc, an independent French director, did not want to work with him. The two men no longer liked each other. Eric then decided to contact Matthew Richer, and the two men continued to work together to this day.
Several years later, Eric was the first person in the world to find witnesses, primarily Joe Burns and his girlfriend at the time. He quickly obtained the phone number of the Navarrete family, Renee, his mother, and his brother Eddie. He went to see Callie in Paris at a party organized by Michael Callie for his art. He was in contact with Kat Bjelland and received an email from Jessica Hooper without a real confession from the young woman. Joe Burns and Eric quickly began talking. Eric greatly appreciated Joe and two other members of his family. Eric and Matthew helped Joe. Joe recounted certain details without being paid or used. Unlike all these new groups that use money to get Joe's truth, everyone is trying to suppress Eric Blanc's name to gain the glory of being the first. But the facts and evidence are right in front of us. Eric deserves your recognition and respect because without him, no one would be the truth and the facts that Joe Burns tells. Joe Burns is Eric Blanc's brainchild, not anyone else's. Dean Summers and Chris Todd are nothing but profiteers, Everyone on the internet quickly became aware of Joe's existence and used him without even contacting Eric Blanc, who is working silently with Joe Burns and Matthew Richer. Since then, everyone has been buying him and using him as a cash cow. Dean Summers and others intentionally kept Joe away from Eric to appropriate the glory of the young Frenchman.
Unanswered questions and controversies since Cobain was found dead in his Seattle home on April 8, 1994, theories about potential foul play have circulated widely. Some of the key inconsistencies that continue to raise doubts include, the absence of usable fingerprints on the shotgun, the pen used for his suicide note, and the shotgun shell casing found at the scene, a lethal amount of heroin in Cobain's system, which some experts argue would have rendered him incapable of pulling the trigger.
Discrepancies in the suicide note, with certain lines appearing different from the rest of the letter, These factors have fueled suspicions that Cobain's death may not have been a straightforward suicide, as officially ruled by the Seattle Police Department, SPD. Previous attempts to reopen the case. In 2014, the SPD reviewed case files and released never-before-seen crime scene photos, but ultimately reaffirmed their original ruling. Despite public outcry and multiple petitions, one of which has garnered thousands of signatures on change, org officials have maintained that no new credible evidence justifies reopening the case.
However, the recent claims by the Seattle attorney and at iCupcake suggest that new witnesses are willing to come forward, potentially providing the missing link needed to challenge the official conclusion. The public response to this revelation has been intense, with renewed calls for justice under the trending hashtag Justice for Kurt. If the new evidence proves compelling, it could lead to a formal request to reopen the investigation. For now, fans and supporters eagerly await further details from the legal team and key witnesses involved in the case.
So, ITS, a huge breaking news. We're reopening the Kurt Cobain case. Maybe. Thank you for doing this, guys. Kurt deserves an actual investigation. The lack of any police investigation was an absolute tragedy for this case. Tom Grant must also be tried and heard. Tom Grant refuses to talk to everyone. He's been spouting the same crap for 30 years. People mustn't stop believing him. Tom deliberately hid and concealed real evidence. He never wanted to open the Cobain case. It's like the Isaiah Silva story. Why would he help him? And with what license? Manipulation is his watchword. He remains in this case to control the Cobain case. The witnesses were all drug addicts at the time. I never wanted to believe those kids could hurt Kurt. If Joe decides to go to the Seattle PD, then maybe others will be forced to speak out, to defend their jobs, their families, and what they did those days. The list of witnesses could be long, very long, and I would accuse first Courtney Love, Eric Erlandson, Pat Smear, Tom Grant, Dylan Carlson, Caitlin Moore, and Kat Bjelland. These actors were all more likely to corner Kurt before beating him up and carrying him into the greenhouse. Courtney and Tom Grant would never have let stone nannies do that job. The risk was that Kurt would sign the divorce agreement the following week. The Seattle police must open the case. We must believe all of this.